Good evening. Welcome to Class 2, which is Orientation to Professional Identity and Functions, Advocacy and Counseling. So, for today's lesson, the learning objectives are for you to be able to identify personal morals, values, and beliefs that comprise your professional identity, be able to conceptualize your morals, values, and beliefs as they relate to self advocacy, and to also synthesize the practical application of theories to social injustices. So, for our first activity, we're going to do some self reflection. And so, during this time, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, and I just want you to jot down some of your morals, values, and beliefs. You don't really have to go in detail, but just make a mental note of it. And while you're thinking about those beliefs, also write down a social injustice you've experienced, or whether it's just an adversity, whether it's been with family members or a political figure, whether it's been something that's happened because of a job. Just start reflecting on that. And when you think about what's inclusive of an adversity and injustice, just refer back to some of the readings. But just take a few minutes to just jot down some of that, and then we'll proceed.
Okay.
You have all your thoughts together?
I think so.
So what we're going to do is we're just going to discuss some of those things that you jotted down. You're only asked to disclose as much as you feel comfortable disclosing because they are your personal thoughts. So what are some of your morals or values that you were able to identify?
I guess some of my morals and values are kind of how I view my, I guess you'd say, my credibility.
Okay.
You know, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. You know, um, I tend to be very loyal to somebody.
Okay.
You know, and so I consider myself to be a very trustworthy, and so I would place that very high on my morals and values.
So basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, you are saying that one genuine value or belief you have is in authenticity.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that would be a good word to put.
And were you able to identify an injustice or an adversity you faced because of that, or in a situation where someone lacked that?
Yeah, when I was a school counselor, I worked for a principal who was a bully, and because of my religious beliefs, she bullied me and got the rest of the administrative staff, or bullied them into bullying me until I basically left.
So how did you feel in this situation?
Um, Pretty bad. I didn't feel like I had any support. I couldn't go above her because nobody would do anything to her. I attempted to go above her. I attempted to try and solve things with her. I attempted to go through the hierarchy, you know, of remediation with her. And no matter what I tried, it just.
So did you kind of feel like because you were the new kid on the block, it's kind of like you can't sit with us. So
Mhm.
even though I have an issue and there are policies and procedures that say this is how we address the issue, because the supervisor may have been in the in group, regardless of you following their procedures, you were adversely just in a situation where it's either you take it or you walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you left, were there any adverse consequences? Was your self esteem affected? Was there any kind of mediation options that you looked into outside of the organization?
Yeah. When I left, I actually went back to the campus to market myself as private practice because I was working in the area. And when I walked into the campus, um, the entire front staff vacated the office. It was like they were told if she walks back into this campus, you leave and do not talk to her, which was pretty brutal.
Now, was that your perception, or were those words actually told to you?
It was my perception based
Okay.
off of the actions.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, there was no mediation provided, no backup provided or anything like that. I did find out from one of the APs that and he apologized for his actions and he admitted that they were all told you either treat her like this or else it will be you.
So someone was advocating for you.
Mhm.
And so the purpose of this self-reflection before we jump into the lesson is for us to start thinking about what is important to us and what draws a line for us, because in order for us to advocate on behalf of others, we have to be aware of what areas are sensitive to us,
Right.
what avenues we take at resolving. Because if a client came in and they had this exact issue, it's if this is something that I haven't worked on, it may be some counter transference that goes on.
Absolutely.
And so with that, we move on to our next slide, which is a guided discussion. So this is a list of things that people would rank as being most important. And so briefly, just take a look at each of the areas. And the categories are spiritual or religion, job and money, respect, education, friends and social life, and good health. And so, although these little icons are symbolic, you can replace those with, you know, what it means to you. So when it comes to a job, it's if advancement is very important to you and salary is important to you. Um, just figuring out if you need to replace certain words with people to personalize it to what you believe in, you can do that as well. But I just want, take a couple minutes and look at what's important. Um, and as you're thinking and jotting down, kind of want to process with you the purpose of this activity. And so as you look at the items on this list, let's imagine that life took a turn for the worse. Something you completely didn't expect happened, and it caused a drastic change in your life. As a result, you lose three things on this list. And so as you look at this list and you look at the six categories that are pictured, choose the three things that would be easiest for you to give up and cross them out. And as you're crossing them out, imagine that as you cross them out, they'll be gone from your life forever. So you can't trade out. It's whatever you cross out, when you wake up tomorrow and the subsequent days after, they're gone. Just take a few minutes to really think thoroughly through that, or a few seconds.
Let's see. I would say job and money, good health, and education.
So when you wake up tomorrow morning, All you would have was your religion,
Mhm.
your friends. What was the other one?
Did I cross out?
Yeah.
I crossed out job and money, good health, and education.
Okay. So what would your life look like if all you had was your religion and your friends?
It would still be peaceful because I'd still have God as the primary focus, and I'd still be able to have my support system here.
Okay. And so how would life look for you with no money?
Difficult, but I've been there before.
Okay. And with good health, it's interesting that you crossed out good health because it's having a social life. I got to be able to interact. I got to be able to travel. I got to be able to communicate. And if I'm in poor health, let's say I'm in a vegetative state, it's like I have friends, but I'm a vegetable.
Yeah.
So what can I do with friends? I have God, so God can bring me out of this, but I have no money. So without money, I can't get health care. So it's going to be kind of hard to enjoy this last aspect. And so what's important is this is what our clients face.
Mhm.
It's when we look at our clients, what the purpose of this activity is, how do we think our clients who wake up every day to another missed opportunity feel? And that's where advocacy comes in. It's when we look at those populations where they have developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, whether it's physical disabilities as well, but they don't have any money, low economic status, they don't have education, they didn't have that family, social, community support to help them get any of these things. It's how do we start helping them? Because for you and I, it's easy to look at these things and comprehend, okay, well, with God, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So if I have to give up everything and all I can have is this one thing, then ultimately I can survive. But when we look at our clients, it's I don't have, I can't have, I won't have, I don't deserve to have. And so they're at that low point where it's everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. There's no hope for me. So when we're looking at advocating, how do we meet our clients where they're at? And so according to social justice theories, and in the course readings, there were a vast variety of them, but for the sake of time, I just want to focus on these four. And so for the first one, utilitarianism, utilitarians, their belief was that the maximum good for the greatest number of individuals. So based on this theory, utility ought to be the measure of good, right, morality, progress, and justice. Justice must be demonstrated, and the welfare of the needy and the oppressed be protected. So based on the readings and based on the synopsis I just gave, how do you feel this will be beneficial for someone of a low economic status?
I don't think it would be beneficial for somebody from a low socioeconomic because they're already at the bottom, which means the greatest good is going to be for whoever's at the top.
Okay.
If I'm understanding you correctly. So they're kind of out of luck.
And so basically, the key component of thinking about this is justice must be demonstrated and the welfare of the needy and oppressed be protected. So what they're theorizing is that basically the concept of advocacy, when justice needs to be demonstrated, it's we need to show that we're working for the greater good. It doesn't matter if I make this amount of money and the person beside me doesn't make anything. It's I need to advocate. I need to be a voice. It's just because I'm here doesn't mean they don't matter down here. And so it's pretty much all inclusive. And those who are needy and, less off, their rights need to be protected, just like the ones who have that higher level. It's all inclusive, working for the greater good. And so when we look at the next theory, self perfectionism, when you hear the word self perfectionism, what comes to mind? Or what came to mind before reading about what self perfectionism was?
Trying to make myself be the best that I can be.
Okay. And so when you see my station and its duties, what does that bring to mind in terms of justice?
It's all about me.
Okay. So according to this theory, it's about self-protectionism. So you were correct. This theory stressed the idea that if each individual does the duties of their station, the establishment of a just and good society would be easier. So according to this slogan, my station and its duties, the greater good can be protected if each individual person with their each individual skill set focuses specifically on that skill set. For instance, a teacher's duty is to teach. A therapist's job is to therapist. A surgeon's job is to perform surgery. A police's job is to protect. And a lawyer's job is to defend. The third theory is interesting. Marxism. The belief of Marxists was that economic structure plays a decisive role in establishing and maintaining social justice. So with Marxists, there was an identified struggle between the have and the have-nots. And through social justice, the focus is on fair distribution. The Marxist theory implies that all benefits and burdens within a society shall be properly distributed among all members of society. No discrimination shall be allowed to rise. So what does that make you think about?
Socialism.
And why did you say socialism?
Social justice and just spreading the wealth among everyone.
So it kind of goes with the maximum good of the greatest number of individuals. So if everybody's working together, then everyone can be adequately served. Everyone's needs are being addressed. Everyone is collectively working to preserve the welfare of each other.
Yeah.
And so in a perfect world, that's how life would work. But because it doesn't, thus we're here learning about advocacy. Last but not least, the last chosen theory was the Rawls theory. And according to Rawls, inequalities in the allocation of goods are permissible only if and only if they work to benefit the least well-off members of society. So according to Rawls, each person should have equal rights and opportunities, regardless of what family they come from, how much money they make, how much money they have, what they do, what they don't do. Everyone should have equal rights. And social and economic inequalities should be arranged to offer benefits to the least advantage. And so basically what this summary means is that when we're looking at working for and advocating on behalf of the less desirable population, it's for those who can't speak for themselves, for those who can't access resources, for those who are afraid to ask for help. Those are the ones that we are going to be reaching out to the most, because we really want to maximize those members because they're at the bottom of the food chain. So it's obviously we want to be able to bring them up so that there is an equal possibility of them being serviced, just like those who sit at the top with the most wealth. And so now we pause for theory application. And so what I want to do is I want to go back to the injustice and adversity that you explained earlier, which was being excluded because you were new, being bullied, because that's definitely something that there are legal laws and precedent for to protect you from that. And so looking at the four theories that we just discussed, I want to choose a theory and apply that to your situation.
Okay.
Do you need me to go back to the theories?
Probably.
Okay. Okay. So which theory do you think would be most applicable to your experience?
Probably that last one.
Rawls's theory?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was one of those situations where I couldn't speak up for myself. Since I was on the bottom of the totem pole in that situation, I was the last one hired.
So switching roles from counselor to client.
Mhm.
In that situation, you're the consumer. So, the counselor is working on your behalf to mediate that situation.
Mhm.
What are some specific things, if the counselor is your voice and your one hope of getting your voice heard, what are some things that you want your therapist or your counselor to specifically focus on in order to advocate for you?
Good question.
Because when we say, you treated me wrong, this is against company policy.
Yeah.
So basically, when you present it like that as a employee, it's, you open the door for the management to say, so documented proof anything happened. You're just angry because we didn't need you or your work lagged. And it's like, but there's no documentation that my work lagged or that, I did something wrong. And so you get into that power struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and as a client, when you said you didn't know, as a client, that's what we have to be prepared for is our clients, they want access to resources. They want to be heard, but having that knowledge and those resources to be able to stand up and say, this is how I stand up for myself, that's what they lack.
Right.
And so that's why it's important for us to be able to know. And so when you put yourself in the shoes of a client, it's like, if I couldn't figure out this, then that kind of gives me, it alludes to the fact that when I'm advocating on behalf of my client, they may not know how to put in words what they're feeling, but I'm still expected to advocate for their good.
Right.
And so that was the whole purpose of the exercise at the beginning. We have to be aware of what issues we have. We have to be aware of how we view ourselves and how we view social justice. Because if we have a tainted view of what social justice is or what injustices are, then we have a biased and skewed perception of how to advocate successfully. And the last thing we want to do is to advocate in counseling in a negative way that does more harm than good. So just to recap this lesson, you were able to identify your personal morals, values, and beliefs that help comprise your professional identity. You conceptualize your morals, values, and beliefs that were related to self-advocacy in order to synthesize practical application of theories to social injustice. So you were able to not only look at your own biases, but to actually conceptualize them and apply them to social justice theory. So you were able to see what it looks like to take an issue and submerge it in research and findings to be able to learn how to effectively advocate on behalf of yourself. And so once we learn how to advocate on behalf of ourselves, we can learn how to advocate for others. So before we end class, we have a couple upcoming assignments. The required journal article, Infusing Social Justice Advocacy into Counselor Education, Strategies and Recommendations. This is a really good article. It was the only required article for the class. And so this really puts into perspective the activity we just did in class. And it also gives you a good frame for this final assignment. Now, on the social justice reflection and research paper, It's everything that we just did in class in paper form. It's I'm identifying an issue, I'm looking at the resource, what the research says about certain issues, and I'm going to have a certain number of resources that I've used, journal articles, books, websites limited, but scholarly research on social justice theories and advocacy principles. And then taking that paper for the final capstone assignment and turning it into a presentation. And so the presentation is something that you don't want to wait until the last minute to work on just because it feeds off of the previous assignments. So in the presentation, you're putting your heart into it. It's find an issue that you're passionate about, a social injustice. So for you, maybe it was, people who are getting bullied or people who are less advantaged. Maybe that's your chosen topic, your chosen population. And then having a presentation of if you were standing before an organization and you were really advocating for the rights of this population, what would that look like? And so that's the purpose of the final assignment. And then lastly, here are references that I used for the course. A lot of the references were actually from substance abuse groups, because those are surprisingly how a lot of the substance abuse research has more meat, and more volume, and it goes in depth. And when we look at the activity with values, it's substance users find a lot of times or have a hard time distinguishing between what they take for granted and what's really in reality. And so being able to work with that population, a lot of the stuff we can adapt to our clients, and so we can use things interchangeably. And so that's where a lot of these resources came from, as well as the textbook on leadership and advocacy, because leadership is what your identity is about. It's being a leader. Advocacy is standing up for what you believe in, not only for yourself, but for others, for the greater good. And so, do you have any questions?
None.
If we have no questions, then class is dismissed.